Welcome to the Wednesday Wellness Minutes, everyone. This is Dr. Schilling, bringing you this week's edition. And today we're talking about food, and are we allergic to it, or are we being affected by what's being done to our food? And if you don't know anything about the agricultural industry or the farming industry, the poor farmers, hardest working people on the planet probably, one of the least thankful jobs on the planet, and they're producing crops based on grain that they're buying from Monsanto and other companies that are genetically modifying and changing the DNA of these products. So what you want to understand about food is it's not necessarily a one-to-one ratio. Is it us or is it the food, or is it it's most likely a combination of both. Whether you have crops that have their DNA changed so that they're Roundup ready, and they already have Roundup impregnated in their DNA, or whether they're sprayed with things like Roundup and other chemicals of that matter, they're affecting how your body is receiving them. So if you understand anything about a GMO product, genetically modified organism is what GMO stands for. So whenever possible, look for non-GMO verified on your packages or things like that, because it's really important. If you are buying conventional products, conventional vegetables and things like that, it's a safe bet that they're probably going to be somehow tinkered with in some way, shape, or form in order to make them a hardier crop, less affected by pests, the bugs, funguses and things like that. So they used to use manure as fertilizer on our food, not on our food, but on the crops, shall we say, which ultimately is our food in the fields. And at some point, in fact, it was probably full-blown change in the 50s, but somewhere after that, chemical fertilizers started around the turn of the century, if I'm not mistaken. And down the road, basically, they turned over, and people were complaining about the smell of manure, and they were worried about the bugs, right? Are you going to get sick from using manure on the crops? When that's how we farmed as humans for millennia prior to using chemicals. So part of what you're dealing with as far as people's food sensitivities, or if you go to a medical doctor, they're called allergies, whether it's a celiac issue with gluten or a dairy intolerance. People think of, I'm lactose intolerant. When the sugar may give you some gas bubbles, but it's really the proteins of the casein and whey, or casein, C-A-S-E-I-N, and the whey, W-H-E-Y. Those are the two big proteins in milk that are causing an allergic reaction in your body, potentially. Not a guarantee for everybody, because it's multifaceted. Not everybody walks around with a bloated gut and gas and things like that when they eat dairy. And not everybody's walking around with a bleeding ulcer in their gut because of gluten. So what you understand is there's more to it than just what you're eating, okay? Keep in mind what environment you're putting that food into has a big impact on how it's processed in your body. So most Americans these days are running high on the adrenaline, the hormones of stress, adrenaline, cortisol, and things like that. And when our body is constantly in fight or flight and constantly stressed, it's going to create an environment that these foods are coming into, and it's not necessarily going to be easily digested, because if you think about when you're in stress, your body is not really thinking about, relaxing, having a calm meal. It just doesn't work like that. Your body is sending all the blood away from your digestive tract out to your extremities so that you can either fight, hide, or run. Fight, hide, or run. So fight or flight is the nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system. What you want to be in when you're eating food and relaxing is called the rest, protect, and digest mode, and that's the parasympathetic nervous system. So while I may be affected by gluten and dairy, that may be because of what I ate as a child and the stress that I was under as a child growing up and things like that, and family stress, which we all experience that, unless you're part of the Cleaver family or some other silver spoon family that is just sunshine and roses that I'm not aware of. It's just not the common. Now, there are exceptions out there. There are people that live completely unchallenged, unstressed childhoods, and they grow up just fine. For the rest of us, we tend to have some challenges in our digestive system, and that could be stemming from lack of acceptance or feeling unaccepted. That can be from anger and frustration, things like that. All of these emotions can affect your digestive system. So when you think about it, is it the food, or is it us, or is it what they're doing to the food? It's a combination of all. It's like alphabet soup, shall we say. You got the chemicals on the food, you got the GMO crops and stuff like that, and then ultimately you have to come back to say, what is going on in my body? What's fascinating is that there are people that can actually ingest what's called strychnine, which is a poison, and if any one of us average folk were not in the mental state to ingest it, it would actually cause us to die. But there are people, and it's been recorded, shall we say, that they can ingest atrazine, excuse me, that's a chemical they put on food, strychnine, and they can live without any issues, all right? I believe it was somewhere down in Texas, a group of, maybe it was a cult or something, I'm not sure. But so what the environment is that you're putting the food into is probably the most important thing that you can do. Our family, we say a gratitude, I don't know if you want to call it a prayer, we say a gratitude statement, thank you to this world, thank you to this family, thank you to this life, and things like that, to acknowledge the different areas, thank you to the farmers, this part of the world. But setting the intention in our digestive system, in our body, the energy, if you will, of accepting and being grateful for what we're receiving, shall you say. Because if you could eat the best organic food, you can eat the best cooked food, the cleanest food possible, and you can still have an adverse reaction because of the environment on the inside. Yes, is it wise to avoid Roundup and GMO crops and stuff like that? Absolutely. But if you don't have the financial wherewithal or the ability to buy all organic crops, then what are you going to do? You're going to walk around stressed thinking, oh my gosh, I'm getting Roundup and I'm getting this and I'm getting that, and you're going to stress out about it, which is only going to add stress to your life. So what you can control is your internal environment, okay? And when that internal environment is sound and peace and calm, then a lot of good things can happen. Your body has an amazing ability to take the good from something and reject the bad. And if you're not dealing with major stresses in a lot of different areas of life, you're going to have an environment that's going to be receptive and able to cultivate what it can from those foods and release the toxins back out of the body. So don't underestimate the power of your body's ability to harvest what you're giving it and provide benefit to you from it and not have any adverse effects. In excess, yes, of course. Roundup and atrazine, all this stuff. I mean, the company who made atrazine actually has a patent for a cancer drug to fix what the actual chemical causes. So it's very interesting. We were just talking about the coronavirus, which is really hot right now. And of course, that was developed in a lab somewhere in 2015. And so it got loose, okay? But give you some ideas of some of the reactions that you have in your body and or some of the reasons why you crave different foods, okay? And I'll keep it short just to give you some high points. People tend to have issues with gluten or gliadin as a binder. People tend to have issues with wheat products, which is the same thing. Dairy products, corn, nightshades, and things like that. These are pretty common because if you look at anything in a package, it's almost exclusively has corn, gluten, dairy, some sort in there. So let's say, for example, you wanted to eat a pizza, right, which is like the trifecta. You got nightshades, tomato sauce, you got the wheat on the crust, and then you got the cheese on top. So that may help you in the nightshade compartment. If you're feeling a lack of confidence, you may be driven to eat some pasta. Have some pasta sauce. That would help. Okay? You might feel nervous and unsure. Give me some nightshades. Give me some potatoes, tomatoes, peppers, onions, something to sedate that sensation. And or if you grew up in a stressful family that maybe, let's say it's Italian, you got some wheat and some pasta and things like that, some pasta sauce. And now when you eat these things, it can trigger your brain into remembering when you were younger, because every time you have an experience in your life that's powerful enough and there's a elevated emotion enough, it's like your brain starts running a video recorder. And it's taking note of everything in your body, outside of your body, smell, sound, taste, touch, vision, people, places, context, and all that. Your brain's taking a note of that, and it's like an 8mm film in your brain somewhere. So when things come into your system, or you smell, hear something, see something, or it's a different context, it can trigger the same thing in your brain just as powerfully as you experienced it the first time. It's absolutely fascinating, but that's just the power of your brain. So moving on from nightshades, let's talk about dairy. So if you are feeling unable to love or unable to nurture a relationship, you might say, man, I should just go eat some cheese curds. As an example, our lovely friends in Wisconsin, they love their cheese curds, which I don't begrudge them, they're delicious. They tend to give you a little tummy aches, but well, that's okay. But if you're feeling that, you're like, I can't nurture, or it can trigger the same opposite reaction of, it reminds me of a time when I couldn't nurture or couldn't love someone or something like that. So these are all relevant as far as what's going on the inside of the body. Now, if you're feeling like you're struggling or you don't want to struggle, you might go diving into a pile of carbs. That could be a plate of pasta, take your pick, rice, anything, the carb family, sugar family. You might have a sweet tooth. You might go into the chocolate cake. We can go on and on with that. So it's just fascinating how the foods affect you and how the different stressors can be stored in your nervous system. So just appreciate that as you've heard me say 1,000 times before, no one thing causes any one thing. And it's just not the food, it's also the environment you're putting into. Okay, so be mindful of what you can control, which is your internal environment. If you can control your internal environment, the food's going to be much less of an issue for you as far as what's going on as a chemical reaction, right? If you find yourself having a reaction to a certain food, try separating them out and figuring out, okay, if I just eat cheese, how do I feel? Or if I just eat wheat pasta, how do I feel? Or so on and so forth. If I just have if I just have a potato, how am I feeling with this? You're going to be able to separate it out and identify, and then from there, once you've identified, yep, this is where I'm getting my reaction. Maybe it's from broccoli, which is pretty rare, but hey, who knows? It's possible, but if you can isolate it, then we can help you understand what it is and how it's triggering you, and maybe it's triggering a reaction in your body, or you're eating it in order to avoid feeling a certain thing. It's all relevant, right? Because we're neurological, emotional, neuroemotional beings, we're structural beings, and we're biochemical. So the biochemical comes in, it can affect the structure on the inside, inflammatory-wise, which is really related to biochemistry, which then can trigger neurological, neuroemotional reflexes in the brain. There are just as many signals sent from your gut back to your brain as your brain down to your gut. It's pretty fascinating. It's called the vagus nerve. And if you want to study that, it's pretty cool. Just to understand, it's called the vagabond. It wanders throughout your body. It's huge. It's the biggest nerve you have. But it sends a lot of information back to your brain. So be most mindful of the state you're in when you're eating your food. Do what you can to eat organic, non-GMO, grass-fed, grain-free, pasture-raised, the whole 9 yards. As far as you can stay to that spectrum, if you will, that's how we used to all eat. And the problem is we've gotten so far away from that we're eating food-like substances, we're hardly eating any food anymore. So one thing I describe is if you can go out in the yard and shoot it with a bow and arrow, or you can pull it out of the ground and wash it off and eat it, you're pretty much safe. If it comes in a box, it's manufactured by someone, and that has to sit on a shelf for a certain period of time. So it's going to have some type of additive or preservative in there to help it stay on the shelf. And or it's going to have extra salt or some other thing in there to trick your brain and can causing you eating more. So just understand that the food industry is not there for your benefit. It's there to make money. And if you have to buy something in a box, just be cognizant, be aware of what the potential side effects are of those. Eating more, mindless eating, things like that. So bow and arrow or pulling out of the ground, you're pretty much safe. As best you can when you buy something from a store, shop the perimeter, because and stay to the grass-fed side, to the pasture-raised side, grain-free, things like that, and also the non-GMO. Okay, if you get anything in a box, make sure it says non-GMO verified. GMO once again stands for genetically modified organism. If you understand that, then you understand that someone in a laboratory decided to create this beast. It's called Frankenfood. Okay, heard about Frankenstein? This is Frankenfood. So it can have an adverse effect on you. But again, dial it back into what you can control. If you do not have the ability to purchase all organic and all grass-fed and things like that, don't lose your mind. It's not worth stressing over. You need to back up and say, I'm going to do the best I can with what I have and the time I have while I'm here. I'm going to look at what I can afford, what I can purchase, and what I can nurture myself and my family with. And then I'm also going to focus mostly on the environment that I'm putting into. Because when you can manufacture all the good hormones on the inside, what you're putting into it is almost secondary. Okay? Just like we talked about the example of strychnine. If some people can ingest strychnine and not die from it, well, you can pretty sure you can take some Roundup Ready crop and ingest that and not die from it. Okay? You want to minimize it, but at the same time, just have an appreciation for taking into consideration what you can control, let go of what you can't. Okay? Well, as we say around here, thanks to Dr. Steve Irestone, we do our best and we let go of the rest. Okay? So use that as a motto. Just remind yourself when you get stressed out of things, look, man, I'm just doing my best and I'm letting go of the rest because it's not worth it. It's not worth stressing out about. So I hope this has been beneficial to help you understand it's not just the food. It's not just are we allergic to it or is it what they're doing to it. It's really about all of it. What they're doing to it, what the food is, how many times it's been processed, and the environment that's going into. All these different factors. Okay? Control what you can, let go of what you can't. Eat, pray, love, as this movie said, and just live life. Okay? So we'll see you next week for the Wednesday Wellness Minutes. Take good care, everyone. Bye-bye.